to my podcast, Keep Your Nose in My Business, the show where we shine a light on incredible businesses and inspirational people right here in Essex. Whether you're a business owner or dreaming of starting something new, or just curious about inspiring people in the community, there's something here for you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and join me as we uncover the stories behind Essex's brightest businesses together. Okay, let's get started. Hello, so today I'm in Burnham-on-Crouch, and oh my goodness, I've just stepped into the most incredible, it's amazing here. I'm not going to go into it too much because I've got the man that runs everything here that we're going to interview today. So John, I'm over to you. What is your full name, John?
I'm John Jolly.
Hello, John Jolly. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, John. Where do you come from?
Well, I originate from Rochford, just across the river. And I spent the first 25 years of my life down there. And then I moved as a farmer.
Yeah.
The family had been in farming since, well, as far back as you like to go. And we then moved and started farming in East Suffolk at Halesworth and spent 11 years up there. And then in 1984, we bought Mangapps Farm here at Burnham, and here we are. That's
a long time you've been in business. That's amazing. And I must say, for the listeners, you can't see this place, but it's literally so inspiring. Kids would have the most amazing day here. This is beautiful. And the work that has gone into this place, as you, and like obviously for you and whoever else is part of it, I don't know who else is part of this business.
Well, yes, it's I've always been in partnership with my son, James, and with my wife, June. So it's very much a family concern.
That's lovely, and it feels so, I mean, you can have so much fun here. So please, I mean, after the interview, hopefully you'll understand a bit more what this place does, and hopefully you'll get lots of people hopefully coming down here, because trust me, listeners, this is such a lovely little day out. It's beautiful here. Well done. Really well done. Okay, so what's the business called?
It's Mangapps Railway and Museum.
Okay, and it says it on the tin. Yeah, yep. Exactly what it says on the tin. And where did the idea come from?
Well, as I said earlier, I was a farmer, and when we was living in Suffolk in the 1980s, I'd been a railway enthusiast all my life, from being a small boy, sort of just after the war, when a lot of your travelling around and so forth was done by rail. Yeah. I got an interest in railways. When I was in Suffolk, by pure coincidence, I bought a farm right next to a railway line.
Okay.
It wasn't planned, it just happened like that, but we were right. Our house was within 100 yards of the Ipswich to Lowestoft railway line. My son, James, was then, when we moved up there, about 2 years old. Yeah. And he had really not come across railways very much, but I can remember him was asking, which bedroom would you like, James? And lo and behold, he chose the one that overlooked the railway line.
Oh, bless him.
So he became a railway enthusiast as well. And although my interest in the subject had rather waned over the sort of 10 years between my mid-teens and when we moved up there, having a son who was also interested brought my interest back as well, and so we then had two railway enthusiasts. We got friendly with the signalman at Halesworth Station, who was a very keen, not only did he work on the railways, fourth generation railwayman, but was also a very keen historian of railways and collector of railway memorabilia.
Right.
And one way or another, we got sort of sucked more and more into this railway thing. James, in fact, used to go during his school lunch hours, the school only being a few hundred yards from the signal box, used to spend his school lunch hours in the signal box with Peter, the signalman, and learned the rudiments of railway operation from that. And so that was really where it all started.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, who's been your inspiration? So I guess you've just answered one of them with your son.
Well, to some extent. I mean, there are people who were an inspiration. I suppose one of the inspirations was a chap called Ian Allen.
Okay.
anyone who has any interest in railways or transport subjects will know that name.
Right, okay.
This Ian Allen was a chap who, as a young man during the war, started work on the mainline railways as a clerk. He was also something of an enthusiast, and he got into publishing books of railway engine numbers. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but there were always a few people who were interested in what was going on in the railways, and they used to spot what engines were running about, and this turned into a hobby, train spotting, which you'll obviously be familiar with. Ian, at that time, there were no lists of the engines that were running on the railways, no published lists. And Ian somehow or other managed to persuade his governors to publish these lists, or allow him to publish them, which he did, which turned out into a money spinning enterprise. And he got into publishing, first just lists of railway engine numbers, which young lads like me used to buy these little books and then go and fill them in, go to their local on train trips and so on. And then he got into more sophisticated publishing, all sorts of books on railways and other transport subjects, and made this into, it ended up as a multi-million-pound business. So, yeah, I suppose in a way Ian, who I much later on got to know personally, was the inspiration.
That's mad, isn't it? To think, I know it sounds silly, but to think that all them years ago as well, you know, and then you got to meet him.
That's right. Well, that was an interesting story in itself. The first time I met him was in about 1960, when I was still very much a teenage railway enthusiast, and I went on a railway trip around East Anglia, which was sponsored by his company.
Right.
And lo and behold, on this particular trip, he was present. And I bought a new book, and I got him to sign the cover of that book for me, which I've still got. That was just a sort of a very informal meeting in a railway carriage. He wouldn't have remembered it. Many years later, well, it must have been in the early 90s, after we'd started this enterprise here at Mangapps, June, my wife and I were invited to a seminar by the Heritage Railway Association, of which he was one of the leading, if not panjandrums, I suppose you might say.
Yeah.
And since we were new members at this seminar, which was held at a hotel that he owned at Broadway in Worcestershire, we were invited to go and have dinner with the great man and his wife.
Wow.
And we hit it off, and he ended up coming up here and visiting us, or they ended up coming up here and visiting us, and he said, well, that's a remarkable thing, really, that after all these years...
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't
and
it?
we were able to show him something that rather surprised him as well.
Sounds like the icing on the cake to me.
Yeah, it was in a way, yeah.
What makes this business unique? Your business?
Well, it's I don't know about unique. It's nearly unique in that there are lots of heritage railways. This is what we nowadays call them preserved railways. We used to call them nowadays. They tend to be called heritage railways. But most of them are run by voluntary organisations as charities, or just by small groups of people doing it informally. The difference with us is that it is privately owned museum.
Right,
we run it. It does pretty much the same as many other setups do, but it is a family-run thing, so it does actually reflect our interest in the subject as well, which does rather make it unique, and people do appreciate that. We often are told that it's nice. It has that sort of family and personal atmosphere, which most others don't have.
Can you explain exactly where we are?
We're about halfway between Burnham Town and Southminster Village, along the Southminster Road.
Yeah. And I see a big sign as I come along, so
and
you won't miss it.
If you come along the Southminster Road, you'll see the big Mangapps Railway sign there.
Yeah.
We're open every weekend for most of the year. We're closed during the depths of winter from November until the end of January. But most of the rest of the year we're open every weekend. But at school holidays, such as starting today,
which is amazing,
we're open every day. We get a lot of families with small children because small children, I have to be sexist here and say especially boys, tend naturally to lean towards railways for some reason or other. So there's that. You get a lot of people who are railway enthusiasts. I mean, broadly speaking, it is said that about 10% of the population have some interest in railways. That's very wide. I mean, some of them are interested in a particular aspect of the real thing. Some are particularly into steam trains. An increasing number are particularly the earlier diesel trains. A huge number of people are into railway modelling. And so on. So it's quite a broad church, really. But and then, of course, it's just people who are in the area, tourists and so forth, who want to come and see something a bit different.
But you know what, John? I'm not just saying this. They're missing out in Burnham if they're not coming here.
Well, they are, but you know, we've been working on this, you know, for nearly 40 years now. And yes, it is. We're getting here gradually.
What's been your biggest challenge?
We've had various. I mean, when we started, we had, not when we initially started, but after a little while, we started to have problems with the planners. That could be a problem. Mainly because they were not familiar with it. They'd never come across anything like it, and it worried them. What they foresaw was a huge Disneyland-type theme park. Which, of course, was not our idea at all, but that can be a problem. Other little things that particularly concern me, foot and mouth disease. In 2001. I mean, I was a farmer, although we didn't have, the only livestock we had was a few sheep to keep the grass down in the car park, basically. But that was enough to give us big problems because we had to close down. And that really knocked us for most of that year of 2001. I mean, this is the trouble with anything like this. You're very vulnerable to things which on the face of it, completely, you know, you wouldn't even think about them being a threat. But then the fact that we had those sheep here were a major threat, which was unfortunate for the sheep because they left very rapidly after that. People say to us, well, why don't you still have the animals here? Well, that's the reason why.
What makes it harder nowadays to run a business like this?
Bureaucracy, like the planning issue, is not the problem that it used to be. On the other hand, particularly recent events, particularly our present government's financial or tax policies, are very, very worrying indeed. We've had 12 months of being a family-owned business. We've had 12 months of a great deal of worry because of the inheritance tax, not so much the other factors, national insurance increases don't affect us because we don't employ anybody. We work with volunteers. But the inheritance tax is a very serious threat to us, as is the lack of help from the government to local authorities, which is going to increase business rates, which could also again become a problem. So it's a game of two halves, as they say.
There's not a lot of businesses out there that are still going after 40 years. So a massive congratulations for that. I mean, that's amazing.
We haven't really thought about that until now. We've now got to an age where you think, my goodness, we have been around a long while.
What would you do? What makes you tick, though, you personally?
Well, I've always liked to do new things. So I was in farming for years, and I enjoyed trying to. I mean, I was one of the first people who grew oilseed rape in Essex, for example.
Wow!
There's something for you. Yes, it was great fun to go into a pub and then start up a discussion with your friends about rape and watch people's faces, you know. But that was back in that would be back in the 1960s. I mean, things like that. And it was a great challenge to move up to Suffolk and to start farming in a completely different area, and again to move back to Essex, because although we came from Essex, from South Essex, Dengie was different. I retired from farming back in the early 2000s, 2005. We sold most of the farm here, mainly because I had been very active in the National Farmers Union. In fact, I was, in the end, chairman for Essex for 2 years, over the year 2000. And there's always a drawback to being being mixed up in an organisation like that, because you can see things coming down the line politically. I'm speaking about, and the view at that time was not at all encouraging.
No.
And I foresaw that governments were likely to be less and less sympathetic to farming, particularly if Brexit were to happen, which of course it did, and I thought at the time that it was very likely that it would. I'm not saying whether I was in favour or not, but I mean it was a political fact that Brexit was likely to happen, and without the support of the EU, farmers were likely to have a hard time in this country, and that was the primary reason why I decided to pack up. At the same time, my son, who was in partnership with me at the time, found, partly through establishing this, we got contacts in the main line of the real railway world. And James started working part-time on the big railway and discovered that there was a lot more money in working on the railway than there was ever going to be in farming. So, put two and two together.
Which is a shame, isn't it, when you think of farming, because farming as well does, it serves our country so well, and it's but it's great for you in the way that the option you took.
Yeah, it was a sad thing to have to do.
Yeah,
I have to say that. It was something which was very, very hard to do at the time, and I was often asked, not so often now, but I was asked at that time, what do you miss about farming?
Yeah.
And so, well, actually, I miss nothing about farming as it is now. I do miss farming as it used to be. And I mean, I'd always been, or tried to be, at the forefront of farming innovation and so forth. So perhaps a strange thing to say, but it's true that you look back and you think, well, actually, if farming was never as profitable as people tend to think it was, but it was very satisfying. And now much of that satisfaction is gone. On the other hand, there are other things. I mean, we haven't only done this. I mean, before we did this the railway operation, June and I spent a time in a small way in the travel business. We used to travel to the continent ourselves, and we found, particularly when we were up in Suffolk, that many of our neighbours had never been abroad. And I used to say to them, well, you really ought to go, travel broadens the mind. This was the other great beauty of not being in farming. We've got more opportunities to do that, not particularly financial, but farming is a tremendous tie. You can't get away. I mean, not an extreme case, it's still a case in many cases, I think. My father spent his whole life farming as a dairy farmer. And a dairy farmer has to be there to milk his cows 7 days a week. Very difficult to get somebody to come and do it for you. With the result, the father never travelled anywhere. He would have loved to.
My brother's got a zoo. So whenever he goes away, I mean, he very rarely goes because of that.
Because of that reason, that's right.
And they're his babies, them animals, so he wants to make sure they're always looked after.
Yeah, that's right. You just can't. And it's actually not quite as bad with arable farming, but almost, because obviously as the seasons change, you've got to do things. You've got to be there to do the spraying at the right time. You've got to be there, obviously, for harvest, and so you've got to be there very timely to do the cultivating and so forth. And you, as a result, don't get the opportunities to travel around. We've had much greater opportunities since we left farming than we'd ever had before. So I say we did a bit of this travel thing. We used to take particularly coachloads of farmers to agricultural shows in Europe, particularly Paris, Frankfurt, I think we did once, Hamburg. Didn't make any money out of it. It was really just a sort of a travelling party. But it was great fun, and it did cover its costs. But we eventually, once we started the railway, found that it's all very well doing 2 different jobs, but doing 3 at the same time was probably too much, so we packed it up. Talking about this farming situation again, I suppose my first realisation that farming was likely to have problems was back in the late 1970s. I was at that time farming at Halesworth, and by pure coincidence, my neighbour was Jim Pryor, who later became Lord Pryor, who had been a Minister of Agriculture. By the time I knew him, he was in different thing. He ended up as Northern Ireland Minister. But Jim farmed about a mile from our farm, and I got to know him quite well. And I remember him saying to me, met him by chance one day, and he said, he said, things don't look good. And I said, oh, what's the matter, Jim? He said, well, I've just been in the last couple of months, on parliamentary exchange visits to the Soviet Union, as it then was, and Brazil. And he said, he said, if the Russians, which we always knew the Soviet Union as the Russians, if the Russians get their politics sorted out and the Brazilians get the corruption sorted out, they are going to be a big problem for us farmers in Europe. And I thought, yes, you could well be right. A few years later, I had the opportunity of travelling to the Soviet Union. This was in the mid-late 80s, and Czechoslovakia, and realised that there was this huge area of undeveloped land that was underdeveloped. I mean, in those days, I tend to forget this now, but in those days, Russia depended upon the West for its food. You couldn't produce enough food. I mean, if they weren't able to buy it from the West, they would starve. And yet they had this vast country with huge potential. And I remember travelling from Moscow to Leningrad, St. Petersburg as it is now, by train. And you went through mile upon mile of scrub. Wow. And then you'd occasionally come across a town, and around the town there'd be a bit of really scruffy farming. I mean, you thought, well, good. It looked like going back 70 or 80 years in this country to see what they were doing there. Absolutely hopeless. And you thought, well, if Jim was right and they ever sorted themselves out, we were in trouble, and we are. That's that. And then later on, I'd had some family connections with Canada. Never went there until, strange enough, at the same time as the foot and mouth outbreak over here in 2001, I'd met the son of our local, then retired grocer, Mr. Chapman from Southminster. Okay. And his son, Robert, had emigrated to Canada 20-odd years before. And he was, by that time, fairly well up in a setup called the Canadian Wheat Board out in the prairies in Saskatchewan. He was over here on holiday, brought his then two small sons, father and granddad, brought the then two youngest sons to one of our events here on the railway, and we got chatting. And because I was in the NFU position at that time, and he was obviously interested in agricultural politics from the Canadian angle, we had quite an interesting discussion. And then, to my surprise, the following February, about 10 days after the first foot and mouth outbreak, he rang me up from Swift Current in Saskatchewan. How'd you like a trip to Canada? Well, never really thought of it. I'd never had time, and I wasn't too keen on flying. Certainly not that sort of distance. But I said, well, but what's the deal? He said, I organise a conference for our wheat board clients, customers, every couple of years, and I want somebody to come and speak to them about the situation of farming in Europe and Britain. And he said, I reckon you could do that. I said, oh, well, I said, he said, deal is, he said, a week's free trip to Canada, he said, and all you've got to do is to stand on your hind feet and speak for an hour. So you manage that, can't you?
Result.
And so it wasn't easy, because the first thing was, of course, because we got a major agricultural or livestock disease problem over here, would the Canadians let me in? And could I, because I got responsibilities of the NFU, would they let me go? And eventually they were both overcome, and off I went to Canada. Really? And was so impressed with the place. Thereafter, June and I had been over there on average every year. And anyway, one of the things that strikes me particularly, that first trip, we flew down, you sort of fly across the tip of Greenland and Baffin Island and so forth, and right across Hudson's Bay, which looked like a huge frozen pond with cracks in it. That was in sort of end of February. Yeah. And then flew across northern Canada for ages and ages and ages. And then eventually you started to come, you could see down there were the signs of where there were edges of fields. And it went on for ages and ages and ages more over what was obviously very from the northern end, very thinly agriculturally developed land, but becoming more and more obviously prosperous as you went further south and ended up at Calgary. And you thought, well, our little country and our little area of East Anglia and our agricultural industry is pretty pathetic compared with that. And, you know, we're not actually very big players in the world.
No.
And I remember going to that particular conference that I spoke at, and there were other speakers, obviously, many of them experts on international agricultural trade and so forth. And that only rammed it home to me, we're only bit players in this job. I mean, we've had a fair bit of support from, first of all, from the British government until the 1960s. Then that started to wane. And then we joined the EU, who were much keener on supporting agriculture, because it's a political issue as well over there, because agriculture is much larger and more important, more people involved in it. And that saved the day for us for a number of years.
How do you see the future for, you know, that side of the farming and also for this business?
As an 80-odd-year-old, it's always very difficult. I mean, people of my age always tend to be pessimistic. Well, you have to be, in a way, and you sort of fear what's going to happen to your grandchildren and so forth. On the other hand, my grandchildren are just as enthusiastic and looking confidently to the future as we were at the same age. So probably it's unfair to worry that much. But it doesn't look good. Particularly the issue of agriculture. I mean, people say, well, yes, but people are always going to need food. Absolutely true. But there's a hell of a lot of food around, and there's a hell of a lot of potential in the world for more food to be produced. You know, there's all sorts of things that happened when I was, I suppose, in younger middle age. You looked around agriculture in the world and you saw the whole of the communist bloc, which couldn't feed itself, which was hopeless. It depended on us. You saw Africa, again, for other reasons, unable to feed itself, and yet it had this huge potential. Perhaps the most remarkable things, you saw places like India, which were always suffering from endless famines and needing food aid from Europe and from America. India is now a net exporter of agricultural products. China, another basket case, is now the biggest producer of rice in the world. Well, it undoubtedly is, but it's also the biggest producer in the world of wheat. Found that out from a Canadian farming conference. You know, they tend to be much more alive to these things than we do. But it's how the world has changed in not even in a lifetime, in a third of a lifetime. And so it's very difficult to foresee, but I don't see food shortage as a whole being any more of a problem than it ever was. The trouble is that, of course, it's not overall food shortage, it's the availability of money or will to sort yourself out and produce the damn stuff. There's plenty of all the raw material there, the land is there. The other thing, of course, is we've got this threat of, I'm not going to say that I'm a climate change denier. I do agree that there is climate change. Where I disagree is that we can do anything about it in the short term. It's got to be a much longer term issue. And the whole thing that goes with it, the whole ecological and green thing. In this country, we got to the stage where we were about 75% self-sufficient in temperate food products, things that we can grow in this country. That's now dropped to just over 60 in about 20 years. One of the main reasons is that we have stopped development of things like agricultural pesticides. Oh, pesticides, horrible things. No, they're not. They're what keeps you going. And this is one of the threats. If you can't use those sort of products, then you're not going to be able to produce enough food. That is a threat.
Of course.
So it's issues like that. It's much more complicated than people think. You know, where we get to a situation where we as farmers are encouraged, financially encouraged, we're not financially encouraged to grow food. In fact, under the present rules imposed originally by the EU, we're not even allowed, or governments are not allowed to support farmers to produce food, but they can support them to grow trees and wildflowers and weeds and rubbish. So, that's the only place you can get money from the government for. Now, if you want to sort of take your land out of production and grow rubbish, now, that rubbish ain't going to feed you.
No, of course not, no. Do you know what, John? I was told you're a really interesting man, and they were absolutely right. You've got so much knowledge. I'm so glad to be interviewing you. What would you tell your younger self? If you could tell your younger self something, what would it be now? What would you have done different, maybe?
I don't know, really. I always had in the back of my mind, about 1960, one of my Canadian uncles, he'd emigrated to Canada just before the First World War, and spent his whole life farming over there out on the prairies in Saskatchewan. I think the only time he ever came back was to fight in the First World War in the Canadian Army. He eventually retired in about 1959, I think it was, and he started visiting here. And he was the typical Canadian, huge fella, 6'5", built like a tank. I don't know why, he was much bigger than his English brothers, but both the Canadian ones. It must be something to do with the air over there, but anyway, there he was, and Uncle Len. And he said, he was trying to encourage me to go to Canada. You want to go to Canada? That's the place for a young man. And I often think, he was probably right.
He's probably right. Look at the knowledge.
But on the other hand, I think I've had an absolutely fascinating life here. I don't think I could have done better in Canada. But
I mean, look at us. We're sitting on a train having a conversation.
Well, that's right. I mean, I'd have never have dreamed of that, even in the I suppose the first inklings that we might do something like this came in the late 1970s, but prior to that, I'd never have dreamed. I mean, it wouldn't have even been considered possible. But we've achieved something, and with this job, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed farming. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and it keeps bringing us new challenges every day. For example, you've turned up today. That's a challenge.
Bless you. It's a challenge for me.
A very pleasant one, I have to say.
Bless you. I must say, for the listeners as well, if you haven't been to this place, it's so unique. And if you haven't seen this place, guys, whether you're in Burnham-on-Crouch, whether you're, some other place in the world, you need to come to this place. You spend a few hours here just looking around, and just John's conversations on your own, John, will keep people busy. But you've got so much knowledge. Again, just quickly remind us where we are, the name of the place, how people can get in touch with you. And so we get some people coming to see this fabulous business. This is amazing. And I've really enjoyed interviewing you. You're such an interesting man. So go on, John, over to you. So
thank you very much, Tina. That's very flattering, I must say. We're Mangapps Railway and Museum. We're on the web, mangapps.co.uk. We're on Facebook. We haven't got to going on to any further than that gets a bit too complicated for me. I'm of that generation that can't quite manage it. But that's where we are. You can always find us on Facebook. Just tap in Mangapps. That's one of the other interesting things. And before you ask,
go on.
Or somebody asks, what does Mangapps mean?
Yes, come on, tell us.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's a quick answer. It was the original name of the farm. The house next door here was originally the farmhouse, Mangapps Manor, but it was a farm. It was one of the two manors in Burnham, and it goes right back to the Middle Ages. It belonged to the Order of St John for many years, and then that was broken up by Henry VIII, and it then went through various other landed families, the Lord Mildmays and so forth, and eventually the farms were all broken up and sold off, and what we ended up was a large part of it. So Mangapps The word was first mentioned, or the name was first mentioned, but spelt as Mangapps in the 16th century.
Wow.
What it means, no idea.
And I'm sitting here because my brain does overtime. Like, I literally don't sleep at night. I come up with all these ideas, and I'm thinking, you could do a murder mystery on here.
Oh,
You could do Valentine's night on here.
We've
It's
done all sorts of
romantic.
things.
It's
Well, we
pretty.
have. I mean, up to
You
a
know.
point, we have done that sort of thing. Because it's a family set-up, it has to be made to fit in with us to
Yes,
some
of
extent.
course.
Now, the position that we've had for years is that it originally obviously started off as a hobby.
Yeah.
And when June and I were younger, we thought, well, we'll carry on and carry on. Never thought very much about the future. Eventually, James will take it over.
Yeah.
We've always had that in mind. He's been a partner in the business from when it started, when he was about 18 until now. He incidentally works professionally as a railway infrastructure engineer on the mainline railway. But the thought is that one day he and his now lady wife Amanda will retire, and they will then take over. But of course, the timing is the thing. Whilst June and I are still fit.
This would be hard to step away from as well.
Well, it would be.
So,
You couldn't really. That's half the problem. But
Yeah.
while we're still fit, it's a good thing to be able. It's something to get up for in the morning.
100%.
You
It
know,
keeps
I
us going,
cannot
don't it?
bear
It's
the thought
lovely.
of retiring. I don't know what we do.
And I can't believe, I'm not just saying it to the viewers, you can't see John, but to say he's 80, you're fit as a fiddle.
81.
81. Fit as a fiddle, John.
But no, I mean, I think part of the reason for that is, first of all, being very lucky. I mean, I have managed to keep reasonably healthy. But the other thing is that because I haven't got time to be unhealthy or retire or anything. I've always got something to do, and there's a lot of that. It's important. You've got to have a reason for keeping going. But we've now got the next generation are now looking towards the situation in a few years' time when they want to retire. And then, indeed, it will carry on as it has before, provided, of course, that we don't get too many more shocks like the dreadful Ms. Reeve and her inheritance tax bombshell, which is going to threaten us and many thousands of other businesses of all kinds.
Well, look, let's be on the positive, because this is an amazing place. And the thought of passing this down your family, I wish you the best of luck. And you don't even lead like you've done this for 40 years. You're a pro. Thank you for taking the time for this interview today. I really appreciate it. And like I said, guys, listeners out there, you need to get and support this amazing business. And it really is amazing. So thank you for letting me showing me around, and obviously the interview today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, John. I wish you all the luck in the future.
Thank you very much, Tina, and thank you very much for coming.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Keep Your Nose in My Business. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you spending your time with me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss what's coming up next. Until next time, take care. And remember, keep your nose in my business.